Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for bearing with us to the third day and the last day of our conference. My name is Noam Tirosh, and I'm a lecturer in communication studies here at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, and I'm also part of the organizing team for this conference. I apologize first for not staying in the second panel yesterday, as I had to participate as a devoted fan in the Israeli Football Cup finals yesterday that took place in Jaffa. I lost my voice during the game, so I feel the need to apologize once again. But I'm sure we all had, and I know we all had some wonderful discussions yesterday during our conference, Digital Holocaust Memory from the Margins, Practices, Places, and Narratives. And I'm sure that we are going to enjoy fascinating presentations and discussions today as well. All this project, all this conference could not have happened without the ongoing activities of the Esther and Sydney Rabb Center for Holocaust and Revival Studies at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. I also want to thank the Bergida Family Foundation for their support of the Rabb Center activities, among them this conference. Mainly, I want to thank the Renia Pearl Estate in the name of Renia, Moshe, and Sharon Pearl of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. The estate made a generous bequest to expand Ben-Gurion University's Holocaust academic offerings, and we are in the Rabb Center are grateful for this generosity. Lastly, I would also like to thank my colleagues, Jackie Feldman, Ronnie Michael, Norma Musi, and of course, Azri Amram, the Rabb Center's administrator, for making this conference a reality. We have a long day ahead of us, and we host 3 panels today. The first panel will soon start, titled Visualizing the Holocaust in the Digital Age, and it will be chaired by the distinguished, I may say, Professor Amit Pinchevski of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Amit's work laid the ground for many of us working on Holocaust memory and media, and it is a pleasure to have him with us today. So thank you, Amit. This panel will host 4 presentations, and it is a good time to remind us all that each panelist will have 15 minutes for presentation, and we will then turn to something like 30 minutes of Q&A. I'll present the second panel afterwards, but the third panel today is not actually a panel, but a roundtable in which we, the organizing committee of the conference, will share some of our final notes from the conference. And I hope we will open the floor for some concluding remarks from you all. So thank you for being with us today. And I want to give the floor to Amit. Amit, thank you very much for joining us. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Noam and Jackie and Noma for inviting me to chair. It's a great pleasure. And welcome, everybody. To save time, I think I will introduce all the speakers right now at the beginning of the session. We have 4 speakers, and in reality now we have 3, but a potential 4th, right? He's not here yet. Hopefully soon. Anyway, I will introduce all four presentations and speakers, and then they will each have 15 minutes to present, and then we'll have hopefully ample time to discuss their presentation. So our first speaker is Laura Leo Dressel from the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, and she will talk about mapping the unapproachable, an analysis of digital mapping practices for memory spaces in Europe. The second presentation is by someone familiar to me, Lital, Henig, and Shir Ventura from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and they will be talking about migrating images of the Holocaust in the digital age, new methods for digital curation. Then someone also familiar to me, Noga Stiassny, also from the Hebrew University, teaching with digital exhibitions, the gas chamber, and the VHH-MMSI. And lastly, hopefully he will be joining us, Henry Greenspan from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and who will talk about Please Don't Hug the Hologram, the resistant claims of the Incarnate in the digital age. So Now to you, Laura, and I will keep time and give you a sign once you're nearing the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will try to share my screen now. Sorry, this was not planned. Now you should see the beginning of my presentation. Okay. Yeah, I'm very grateful to present the subject of my freshly started dissertation project in this context. And I feel honored, actually, that you have invited me. My research focus lies on digital mapping processes, digital mapping practices at Holocaust memory sites in Europe. After an introduction, I will discuss some of the main theoretical concepts that my considerations are based on, and then I will show you some examples of digital cartography of memory sites and formulate questions in relation to them. According to Aleida Assmann, traumatic places are marked by the impossibility of telling their stories. For her, a memory site is an erratic place, according to Walter Benjamin, referring to Walter Benjamin, where the unapproachable distance of the past can be experienced. And my question in my work will be if digital maps are used in the context of Holocaust memory as presumably neutral and objective representations, somehow to react to this dilemma of representation. As critical cartographers, however, argue since the late 1980s, the pretended neutrality and objectivity of the map are hiding the actual often ideological preconceptions that precede the production of maps. The aim of my dissertation will be to find out about the conscious or unconscious preconceptions in the production of maps in the context of Holocaust memory. I aim to pick for my research examples of digital maps from institutions in 4 countries: Austria, Germany, France, and Poland. And in each country, I aim to choose 2 or 3 projects, which I will analyze in detail with the help of discourse analysis and interviews. Now I come to the theoretical background. One point of departure for questioning the use of maps in digital representations of memory sites are current media and cultural studies reflections on Holocaust memory. For example, Eva Hohenberger and Angela Koch describe a seemingly uniform design model that prevails above all at memorial sites in Germany and Austria, and they call it the aestheticizing rational model. And they also speak of it as a model that that tries to stick to neutrality, actually, in the design. And for me, this observation is an indication for the need of a critical examination of the design of memorial sites, be it in digital or analog representation. Digital map and geographic information systems, GIS, are objects of research in critical cartography. This discipline has understood maps as power knowledge complexes since the late 1980s, following deconstructivist approaches. They question the function of maps, but also they critically question the map, but also, for example, Jeremy Crampton see a potential in cartography as an instrument of critique. And this I would also like to examine the critical potential of maps in the context of Holocaust memory. There are newer publications of critical cartography, for example, by Matthew Edney, and he actually sees the problem not only in the maps themselves, but he calls it a complex belief system that he calls ideal of cartography, which goes a little bit further. Yeah, this is about the general role of maps, and I think an analysis of the underlying convictions in the use of maps in Holocaust memory will be fruitful and have the potential to raise consciousness for future mapping processes. So this was about the map in general, and for the digital map, there is actually a theory by Wendy Hui Chung that I think is important also because she speaks of a similar invisibilization, talking about software. So the visualization of software actually hides the material and structural conditions of computers. And so the digital map, if we follow this idea, we tend to think that digital maps hide on two levels, as hiding the presuppositions inherent to cartography, but also the conditions of the software associated with it. So the question is, what do digital maps hide and what are they able to show? In the historical context, digital maps also have strong potentials, I think. And one feature of the map, of the digital map, is its interconnectivity. So at memorial sites, often maps are interconnected with historical data, for example, and images. And Hedwig Wagner, a media researcher, she uses the study of satellite maps in geographic information systems to ask about the change that this interconnectivity means for the power knowledge complex map. And in this context, she wants to know what relationship the real place has to its digital storage location, and, which is for me especially important, whether the places can become relevant as only digital data. Another concept that she introduces that is also relevant for my work, will be relevant for my work, is the concept of imaginary geographies. And she understands this as the conceptions of space, the constructions of national and international worldviews. And as we all know, places of memory are embedded in and often also instrumentalized for a wide variety of national and international narratives. So I think this is an important point. So the role of this imaginary geography in the map production for memorial sites. Okay, I now come to the examples. Maps are often used in official memorials, for example, at former concentration camp sites for virtual tours. So I will show you two examples of this category. One is the Mauthausen Memorial. They have this virtual tour guide. So there is an aerial image of the site, and you can click on some points where you can get historical information, and there are normally also images, but now somehow this is not showing. And then there are, I don't know why, for me the images right now don't work. I don't know why. Normally there's an image. So the green points are actually the points where memorials have been created. And the red points are links to an audio guide, actually. So an audio guide is embedded in this map. And here I'm interested in, for example, how was the process of selecting these points? The second example is, probably a lot of you know this already, the Panorama Auschwitz from the Museum Auschwitz-Birkenau. And here it works as a map on two levels, actually. The one is, it's kind of like Google Maps. It works with panoramic images. with three-dimensional simulations, and also it is a map is linked to it, so you can click on points on this map to see the places. And yeah, here I'm interested what's this this simulation actually. What is the added value, for example, compared to the aerial image, and what is the aim actually of this project? And is it aimed to substitute a visit on site, for example? I'm interested in. Okay, then there are two examples of artistic approaches I want to show to you, because I think that artistic approaches can challenge classical ways of mapping. There is this one project, Verbrannte Orte, which is an atlas of Germany showing places where National Socialist burnings of books have taken place. And you can click on the places, and then you can also click on, you can see pictures, photographs that have been taken, and these were actually the start of the project. The project is by the photographer Jan Schenk, and he started this project as a photo project, and then he made the atlas. And here I'm interested in the role of these artistic photographs and what they can, how they can change the relationship to the space. The second artistic project I want to show to you is Memory Loops. It's actually the official virtual monument of the city of Munich for the victims of the Holocaust. It was created by the artist Michaela Melian. And here's as you can see, a map of the city of Munich, and you can click on these points and hear audio tracks in different points in the city. And there are some audio tracks in German, most of them are in German, and some in English. And what I find interesting in both artistic projects is that they have a very strong choice of how they map. So in this project, for example, you can see that I think this map is hand-drawn. And in the other one, there is this very conscious choice of choosing open source tools. And the other point I find interesting is that both of these projects refer to places where there are no official memory sites. So my question would be if the digital reference can be seen as or can be a substitute of an official reference on site in the real spaces. Okay, now I come to the last two examples. I call this chapter Scale and Layers, because I think scale and layers are two important categories of the digital map. And I think these two projects work in a very specific and interesting way with these categories. So the first project is actually French, Les Parisiens racontent la Shoah. So Parisians tell the story of the Holocaust in Paris.
Laura, let me just interrupt for a minute. If you can wrap it up in 2 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm done in a bit. So yes, it's made by the sociologist Sarah Gensburger, and I will just show you very quickly the ways how the map is important here. So actually here you can click on the map. It should be normally, it should show a map of Paris where you can choose the points where these episodes are told. And then if you click on it, it focuses on a street or on a building. And the second way how I think it works a little bit like a map is that you can actually click on these points in the image, and it shows you archive material, and this archive material is geolocalized. So it, and what I find interesting is that here the map doesn't work as doesn't create a distance, but a proximity. So it wants to show you that actually it happened here, it happened in your neighborhood, right? And I think now I don't have time for my last project, but to show you the last project, but that's okay. I will conclude here, and thank you for listening. And yeah, I'm ready for questions later. I'm excited to discuss it. Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll hear, as I said, Lital and Shir to you. Please.
Thank you, Amit. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see our screen? Can you see our screen? Okay. So, hi, I am Lital Henig.
I'm Shir Ventura.
And both of us work as research students at the Horizon 2020 Research Initiative, Visual History of the Holocaust, Rethinking Curation in the Digital Age. We work in the Hebrew University's research team, headed by Dr. Tobias Erbrecht-Hartmann. And the research initiative aims at a reevaluation of the visual history of the Holocaust. It's based on comprehensive reframing of field documents recorded by Allied forces during and subsequent to the liberation of Nazi concentration camps at the end of the Second World War. Our Jerusalem research team focuses on the circulation of liberation imagery and develops new ways of digitally analyzing the visual memory of the Holocaust as it is negotiated in popular culture artifacts. Today, we will present our method for visual analysis of digital images that relate to the Holocaust, which we call the visual walkthrough method. We argue that this method progresses the analysis of playful digital images that relate to the past and can provide a better understanding of their social and cultural contexts and use.
From online archives to video games, Holocaust-related imagery has migrated to digital media. This migration impacts practices of image analysis, as digital images of the Holocaust behave differently than analog ones. Working in the context of cinema, Tobias Erbrecht argues that, and I quote, migrating images are disconnected from their original context, transferred into visual tropes, and function as memory cues, yet the digital context adds another level of complication. Digital entities, as Lev Manovich explains, exist in digital media in the form of numerical representations. As such, they become modular and apt for automation processes and variable use. Digital entities are also transcoded and therefore take part in what Manovich calls, and I quote, the new computer culture, a blend of human and computer meanings of traditional ways human culture modeled the world and computers' own ways to represent it. In this culture, categories and concepts are substituted by new ones, which derive from computers' ontology, epistemology, and pragmatics. Within so, Holocaust imagery migrates differently in digital media, constituting new visual relations between digitized and digital assets and their historical references. These new relations are very much apparent in our work on Holocaust-related popular culture content, and in particular in Holocaust-related video games. Working on the creation of a database of liberation-related imagery in video games, we found it rather complicated to choose and analyze images related to liberation photographs and footage from video games. At the heart of this difficulty lies an epistemological paradox deriving from the new computer culture. We want to create a comprehensive data of digital imagery related to the historical imagery of the liberation of Nazi concentration camps from video games, yet we cannot create a full walkthrough of a video game, since each game entails various paths, options of play, and endings. In addition, our actions as players impact the images, either by changing them or showing other images instead. Putting it differently, Holocaust-related images that appear in video games are playful images, rotatable, clickable, changeable, variable. While in the past, traditional methods of visual analysis mostly focused on still and sequential images in old media such as photography and film, nowadays much attention has been given to the study of the apps and user interface experiences, to visual platform and cross-platform analysis, and to image textual network analysis. Nevertheless, little attention has been given to the visual analysis of historical video games, and in particular to the analysis of playful images that relate to the past. The paradoxical epistemological status of such images calls for a new method for their analysis, a method that can deal with images that are affected by play, as well as from the means of play, that is, the interface.
And so we suggest the visual walkthrough method for the visual analysis of these playful images, which also takes into consideration the user and the interface. We base our method on Lital and colleagues' walkthrough method, an approach originally configured for the study of digital applications. According to Lital and colleagues, the walkthrough method is a way of engaging directly with an app's interface to examine its technological mechanisms and embedded cultural references to understand how it guides users and shapes their experiences. Like the original walkthrough method, we too wish to understand the images from the cultural and experiential perspectives, but we want to do so from the perspective of play and the way that experiences of play shape images. In addition, the main principle of the original walkthrough method is the step-by-step observation and documentation of an app's screens, features, and flows of activity. It's about slowing down the mundane actions and interactions that form part of normal app use in order to make them salient and therefore available for critical analysis. The visual walkthrough method draws on the same principle, yet it aspires to create a comparative visual analysis that regards the interface as well as the cultural and historical references. The original walkthrough method offers an analysis consisting of 3 steps of app use: registration and entry, followed by everyday use, and ending with app suspension, closure, and leaving. Since we apply this method to video games and wish to focus more on the visual analysis, we also offer 3 steps for the visual walkthrough method. The first is the game description, followed by sampled gameplay, and ending with the gameplay aftermath. First and foremost, in order to use the visual walkthrough method, the researcher should create a walkthrough of a gameplay, either of the entire game or parts of it. After doing so, the first part of the step of the analysis is the game description. It focuses on the contextual information of the game. In this step, the researcher describes the narrative of the game, the subject position the player is stated in, as well as the tools and powers the player is equipped with. The researcher also describes the kind and genre of the game and the major former events that took place in the game until the sampled gameplay. The researcher may also include other relevant information such as protagonists of choice or other human or non-human players in the game. The second step of analysis focuses on the visual analysis of the sampled gameplay. We offer 2 modes for visual analysis. These modes are not mutually exclusive and can be aggregated during the analysis. The first is the still image mode that regards 1 or more images included in a single shot and inspects the relation this image bears with historical imagery. The second, the sequential image mode, regards the visual relations established between a sequence of images and describes them as codependent for identifying the visual relations they share with historical imagery. With both modes, we take into consideration not only the images that refer to the Holocaust, but also the interface and its relation to the analyzed images. By doing so, we wish to show that both interface and Holocaust-related imagery affect and contextualize each other. The third and last step, which we call the gameplay aftermath, focuses on the description of the sampled gameplay's aftermath, meaning what happens after the sampled gameplay. In this step, we describe not necessarily the end of the game, but the scene or level that comes after the sample made for analysis. By performing both first and third steps in the visual walkthrough method, the researcher can not only provide the sampled gameplay with contextual meaning, but also strengthen the researcher's choice made for the sample. I'm sorry, I believe the Prime Minister is now going to our home. Okay, it's done. So it actually, by using both first and third steps of this method, it can strengthen also the researcher's choice made for the sample, that is, when to start and end the sampled gameplay.
We like to shortly demonstrate our method using an example from a sampled walkthrough of the video game Call of Duty World War II. For the first stage of our analysis, we start with the game description. Call of Duty is a popular first-person shooter video game, first launched in 2003. By the end of 2017, it had over 20.7 million players. Released in that year, Call of Duty World War II depicts a US-focused history of the war. In the single-player mode, the player steps into the shoes of Ronald Red Daniels, a Jewish-American infantryman serving in the US military force. The entire game sums to an approximate of 7 hours of gameplay, mostly focused on World War II battles, including the Normandy landings, Operation Cobra, and the liberation of France. Since we were interested in images that relate to the Holocaust, we mainly focused on creating a sampled walkthrough of the Prisoners of War Camp mission, the last mission in the entire game, which takes about 15 minutes. With the help of a professional player, we took an active part in recording the walkthrough, conducting his moves, asking him to slowly walk through the camp and linger by small details, often neglected in pre-recorded walkthroughs of the game. As context, the sampled gameplay is preceded by the Nazis capturing Robert Zussman, a fellow infantryman. Nearing the end of the game, the player follows Zussman's steps into the woods and rescues him. We will shortly demonstrate our visual analysis with two sequences from the sampled gameplay. The first starts with a depiction of a map of Germany superimposed with camp prisoner photographs.
I didn't know anything, but one thing's for certain. What I saw will stay with me forever. Survivors said that the other POWs, including Zussman, had been taken to a smaller camp 3 hours east. All I could do was hope he somehow made it.
Applying the sequential image analysis mode, the adherence of both the map and photos is reminiscent of the map added by Alfred Hitchcock to the British 1945 documentary German Concentration Camps Factual Survey and the liberation imagery displayed in the film. Providing the popular cultural context of the liberation of concentration camps, this sequence leads the player towards the deserted camp.
The player enters the camp's gate with the title Objective Update, Find Zussman. The bottom part of the screen indicates the player's lifespan and orientation, and he is stated on April 4th, 1945 in Berga, Germany. These titles would go on and appear several times throughout the camp, leading him to finding Zussman. The player is equipped with a gun. While walking through the barrack and after asking from his fellow troops to photograph the place, his gun suddenly disappears in favor of a still black and white photograph of the deserted barrack, as if he himself took the photograph.
Our guys, take out your camera. The world's gotta know. They had them living worse than animals. From the looks of it, they were beaten, starved, and worked to the bone.
Susan Sontag argued, and I quote, that photography is essentially an art of non-intervention. The person who intervenes cannot record. The person who is recording cannot intervene. By using the sequential image mode of analysis, we see that in Call of Duty, the player functions as both photographer and actor, player and spectator. In the sequence, the gun functions throughout the game as part of the interface, and now it disappears in favor of a still image of the barrack. Applying the still image mode of analysis, the image references images from liberation of various camps, either resembling by composition to the iconic images of the woman barracks from Auschwitz or deserted barracks in other camps.
In the third step of our analysis, we refer to the aftermath of the gameplay. Leaving the camp in order to find Zussman, the player runs through the woods. Encountering the Nazi abductor, he is asked to shoot him in order to liberate Zussman. After shooting and liberating him, Stiles yet again photographed Save Zussman during his reunion with the rest of the platoon. Following this mission, the game ends with the platoon returning to the US, with Zussman healing in the hospital and Daniels returning to his pals back home. As Andrew Salvati and Jonathan Ballinger argue, Call of Duty provides an alternate scheme for apprehending the historically real. Indeed, though using World War II as a historical frame, Call of Duty manifests its own story of salvation. By separating the tour in the abandoned camps from finding Zussman, a hierarchy within the liberator's actions is created, resulting in catharsis, shooting the Nazi and saving a friend. Nevertheless, although Zussman is Jewish, his saving by no means refers to the liberation of Holocaust survivors. In doing so, Call of Duty does not allow for players to alter the images of the camps, nor to participate in them, only to watch and explore them by the characteristic act of visual commemoration, photography.
So, if I may conclude, as we shortly demonstrated, the visual walkthrough is a method for the analysis of playful images. By using this method, the researcher can identify and highlight cultural and historical references and understand the construction of narratives related to the past in commercial, institutional, and private cultural initiatives being performed in the digital age and digital media. The construction of such narratives also highlights the subject position of the user in relation to playful images and his or her intervention or non-intervention in those images. As such, the visual walkthrough method is a pragmatic tool for the analysis of user interface experience, playful images, and their appropriations of the past. In a broader perspective, we aim towards developing this method further, applying it not only to the field of video games, but also to other forms of playful images, such as virtual and augmented reality tours that use digital and digitized images that relate to the past and play with them. These fields are at the heart of our research, which is a work in progress. We are looking forward to hearing your thoughts and comments, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. And now to Noga.
One second. So, do you see it? Oh, I didn't hear. Do you see my presentation? Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today, actually, I'm going to present you with an overview of some new research I'm currently working on, in which I propose the curation of a digital art exhibition as a pedagogical tool with which to enhance Holocaust memory. As I'm still in an early stage in this research, I have to remain faithful to the text I prepared in advance, so my apologies. Now, it doesn't go here. My presentation is divided into 3 parts: an introduction, a short historical and theoretical background, and a case study of a digital art exhibition that deals with the memory of the Nazi gas chamber, which could potentially be curated with the assistance of the innovative technology offered by our VHH media management and search infrastructure, or in short, MMSI. Now, before I begin, I would like to mention 3 sources that have inspired this research project. First, a curatorship seminar I attended in 2013 in Berlin, in which I curated a digital exhibition that became the conceptual basis for my own dissertation. Second, the Museum Studies Master Program at the UFA, which prepared a very inspiring digital exhibition on Dutch colonialism as part of their curriculum. And finally, the research I'm conducting as part of the VHH research group, and especially Dr. Ebert Hartmann's approach to Holocaust education, which was presented yesterday and just now, and personally has been a wonderful inspiration in relation to working with visual materials. Now, over the last decade or so, the practice of curatorship has gained a major boost from digital technologies within academia, as reflected by a growing interest in the digital humanities and digital art history. As a result, the symbolic power of curatorship has gradually moved from the individual to the machine and its curatorial gaze, to paraphrase Dominic Bönisch. That said, in this presentation, I would actually like to take a step back and to propose curation of a digital exhibition in the simpler sense of an art exhibition curated on a digital platform, in this case, that of the VHH, rather than in the sense of using AI pattern recognitions or automated curations, functions which nevertheless will also be applied within the VHH-MMSI. Sorry, here. I should also clarify my preference here for the term digital exhibition above any other current buzzwords, such as virtual exhibition or online exhibitions. According to Chenupati Ramaya, and I apologize if I pronounce his name not correctly, an online exhibition is, and I quote, an event which can be viewed on computers and mobile phones using internet anywhere, any place, and any time. While generally speaking, a virtual exhibition means the collection of digital replicas. Digital exhibition as a pedagogical tool fits neither definitions. Oh, it doesn't go. Okay. So the last thing is crucial because a digital exhibition can include digitally born artworks or documentation of a site-specific project, for example, which are not replicas, and doesn't have to be accessible from anywhere. Also, two more reasons to deliberately use the term digital exhibition stem from the ongoing digitalization of Holocaust memory and my impression that both online and virtual exhibitions have a more institutionalized and professional character, as can be seen in the many online platforms that now offer their virtual ecosystem to serve artists or cultural and heritage institutions. Now, this is relevant because the strength of a digital exhibition lays in its ability to initiate a research process by forming a visual argument. It should not, therefore, be evaluated only by the end result. Thinking about art history as sitting on the visual periphery or visual emergence of Holocaust memory studies, especially in comparison with the central role played by media and film studies, the possibility of curating a digital exhibition within the VHH-MMSI has many advantages for both lecturers and students. For the sake of brevity, I will list only a few of here. Okay. From a practical point of view, we have the possibility of combining many artworks and to exhibit projects typically considered too fragile, too expensive, or not easy to access. It can also be curated by an individual or as part of a group project. And the VHH-MMSI provides a cost-free and easily accessed ready-made digital environment. From a pedagogical point of view, a digital exhibition requires careful planning that encourages interaction with the visual material. It allows the adoption of both comparative and multidirectional analytical approaches. It can assist in making abstract concepts tangible. It can include detailed image information, which can be supported by annotation. It can teach how to write for specialist audience as well as for the general public. It can encourage creative thinking that stimulates imaginations and goes beyond traditional research methods. And it can be a basis for further research, artistic or curatorial projects, art-based publications, and so on. Now, in the time that remains, allow me to contextualize these advantages within the context of visual Holocaust memory. Gillian Rose writes about researching with visual materials as a methodology that brings together the study of images, that is, their interpretation and meaning-making, as well as the use of visual materials for research. Following Rose, Sabina Niederer proposes viewing a visual methodology as the study of images in their networkness. For example, how images, and I quote, circulate, are engaged with, appropriated, made into memes, and changed over time, end quote. Essentially, this kind of research question is central to both the field of art history and memory studies. For while memories can travel, as well already well articulated by memory scholar Astrid Erl, images from the Holocaust and the liberation tend to migrate between various media carriers, as Ebrecht Hartmann argues, and our VHH research team constantly explores, as we just saw. Now, recognizing the epistemic and mnemonic values of images that use the Holocaust or liberation-related imagery, it is worth noting that the importance of the atrocity pictures captured by Allied cameramen was already acknowledged as early as 1945, not only as visual testimony to be used in war crimes trials, but also as exhibits used for educational purposes within a gallery space. For instance, on May 1st, 1945, an exhibition of atrocity pictures from the recently liberated Bergen-Belsen opened in London, organized by the Daily Express newspaper. While the main motivation for the exhibition was to convince the British public for something they could not even imagine, as the title of the exhibition, Seeing is Believing, reveals, showing, seeing, and believing are, as implied by Dorothea Richter, historical concepts. Taking this premise a notch further, as the years have passed and such atrocity images have ensured their migratory position in global Holocaust memory, today we recognize that remembering as well as forgetting are also historical concepts belonging to social identification and meaning production. Such practices are at the core of the curatorial profession, aiming as it does at establishing aesthetical and thematic thesis that concerns groups of images and/or objects. Hence, with Rose, Niederer, Earl, and Ebrecht Hartmans in mind, and in one line with the Daily Express article that promoted the exhibition, I would argue that believing is not only about seeing or showing, but also about investigating images in their curatorial groupness. In other words, believing also means doubting what the eyes see. As such, when students participate in the curatorial process of a digital art exhibition as a visual methodology research practice, they can engage with Holocaust memory on a deeper level. Now, at this stage, I would like to turn to my case study, which deals with the memory of the gas chamber as a unique site of collective memory. Lital stresses in the different that, I quote, the only witness of the Nazi gas chamber are victims, and since there are no victims but dead ones, no place can be identified as a gas chamber, end quote. Functioning as the archetypical example of the Holocaust missing image, or in some cases, missing site, a crime scene in which the crime committed is invisible, the crime has never been missing from the art field. Now, the first example I'd like to show you is the work of Roma Austrian artist and Auschwitz survivor, Karl Stoika, who lost many of his relatives to the Auschwitz gas chamber. The second example I would like to draw your attention is Luc Tuymans' very famous painting, Gaskammer from 1986, which was based on his visit to the Dachau memorial site that Tuymans decided to paint Dachau's empty gas chamber and used the work's title to superimpose a hunting effect on the image. Now, the final example belongs to Santiago Sierra, who in 2006 launched a very provocative and controversial art project titled 245 cubic meter. Sierra rents a series of black rubber tubes between the exhaust pipes of 6 ordinary cars and the interior of Pulaim's old synagogue. One Sunday morning, the car's engines were left running, pumping gas into the synagogue. The German town's public was invited to enter this improvised gas chamber for a maximum of 5 minutes, wearing a respirator and accompanied by local firefighters due to the risk of death. As one might assume, the project was met with fierce opposition and was immediately shut down. Now, each of these works opens multiple discursive accesses in its own right, whether in the form of a discussion about the history of the Holocaust, the history of the gas chamber as a death penalty apparatus, or pre-war German-Jewish or Austrian-Roma relations, through the internalization of traumatic memories, or in the framework of questions of responsibility, solidarity, and the ethics of representation. Working with the VHH-MMSI enables us to research such issues in greater detail and also enable us to examine these works in conjunctions with other artworks. As the VHH-MMSI has not yet been launched, I'm now going to show you a proposal for a digital exhibition I've prepared in a very, very bare bones way. So, through the curation of the works of Stoika, Toymans, and Sierra as part of a larger digital exhibition, it can be shown that they all have in common the attempt to articulate immersive gas chamber narratives, which are always told from the perspective of the victim. Moreover, curating connections as part of a digital narratology of art history reveals that such narratives have appeared in the works of many famous artists from all sorts of places since 1945, and in rare cases, even before 1945. These works can be divided into three narrational categories, usually connected to the artist's generation and his or her national identity, his or her personal and collective memories, artistic approach, and chosen medium. How historically accurate are such gas chamber narratives? Which gas chamber is particularly recurring and why? Can we identify connections with the liberation visual records? Throughout the curational process of a digital art exhibition, such questions gain a visibility that empowers students to exercise their own historical and visual knowledge about the Holocaust. Now, bearing this in mind, I hope I have succeeded in convincing you even slightly that the digital art exhibition has enormous discursive, creative, and pedagogical potential when applied to working through and working with Holocaust memory in the digital age. Thank you.
Thank you, Noga. And now we welcome our fourth speaker, Henry Greenspan, who is joining us from the United States, right? So welcome.
Yeah, joining you and having my math challenge this morning about what 16 is. So I apologize for my lateness, but here I am, and let's start the clock and at 15. I'm going to read, my apologies to my panelists especially, I want to say, I'm going to read for the sake of efficiency. I'd rather not read, but it will get us to where we want to go in 15 minutes. Looking back, I was lucky that when I began my work in the 1970s, there were a few models for what an interview with a survivor, I'll be doing this a lot. I don't need screen share, but anyway, you guys have it, was supposed to look like. Of course, there was oral history more generally and a range of early projects, but the approach that became almost universal in the 80s and 90s, a single 2-3 hour video testimony interviewed by a stranger, aimed toward a more or less chronological account of wartime experiences, essentially did not yet exist. Survivors and I were thus free to make it up as we went along, that is, to wing it. And one of the things we winged was to meet as often as seemed mutually useful. Several sessions over weeks, months, with some people years, and with a few people decades. This multiple interview approach was itself suggested by survivors. Many said some version, come back next week, we'll talk again, we'll talk some more, and so we did. As in most projects, my first interviews focused on wartime experiences, but sustained conversation led to much wider reflection about topics that are only rarely part of conventional testimonies. For example, reflections about being a survivor, especially in the context of popular ways of representing them as survivors. As Agi Rubin exclaimed about 10 years in, quote, I am not a quote unquote capital S Holocaust survivor. Okay, I survived, but I am not the survivor. I'm not a category, not a thing. We have enough experiences being categories. Other survivors take frank pleasure in their celebrity after years of being known mainly as greeners or damaged goods. So now I'm such a hero, said Abe. Why not? We deserve it. Some survivors enjoy their cultural elevation. Some run the other way. Deepening conversation also situates Holocaust experience more substantively in survivors' wider individual lives. As I've described, the sheer fact of interviewing someone as a survivor inevitably frames the Holocaust as cause and most everything else discussed as some version of effect. Typically, those attributions change over sustained conversation, and so many life choices first attributed to the war turn out to have far more complicated life historical roots, many having nothing at all to do with the Holocaust. In this way, too, survivors emerge as particular people rather than categories. Equally central in my work, when given the opportunity, survivors also speak about their choices in recounting, why they retell some memories and not others, why they have participated in some testimonial occasions and eschewed others, how they've shaped their accounts in response to different listeners, projects, circumstances, how they assess what version of their retelling works for different purposes and what works means to them. While comparative testimony is very much in vogue, analyzing how and why different accounts by the same survivor vary across different times and places, relatively few interpreters have included the views of survivors themselves on precisely those questions. I have argued that that omission can significantly limit findings. Sustained acquaintance also meant that I was often with survivors between their on the record and off the record recounting, over lunch, on the phone, in the car. For example, during our drive home from her talks in schools, Augie often asked, "Do you think this does any good? Am I accomplishing anything by it?" Whatever the answers, they are certainly more complicated than the usual rhetoric suggests, and they compel conversation, as serious questions do. Meeting with survivors over time also allowed me to listen to my recordings between sessions. I did my own transcribing, and this listening to the listening was as important as listening during interviews themselves. I sometimes brought short audio clips from one interview to the next, and survivors and I pored over them together. This is collaborative inquiry most palpably. Augie reflected on such collaboration. One thought sparks another, and then another, that I may not have even known I had. That's the part that's so gratifying. Whatever I imagine I'm teaching, I'm learning at the same moment. We're learning together. We're learning together. Now, testimony is mostly about declaration. This I witnessed or endured or believed, provided for the record, for posterity. Learning together is about exploration. As Augie suggests, there is new knowledge, new thinking on all sides. Indeed, it is not unusual in such interviews for the interviewee to learn as much or more about their experiences and the implication of their experiences as the interviewer. I have long argued that we should listen to and learn with survivors in multiple ways. That is why I use retelling or recounting or simply accounts, relatively neutral words, as the umbrella terms for survivors remembering and reflecting, with testimony being one important and very specific subset. The main thing is that we think through the benefits and limits of whatever approach we pursue. Different terms are not simply different terms, it's not just semantics, but rather connote different practices, predicated on different assumptions about who survivors are to us and how we engage them. My own approach is untypical, but it is not exotic. In 1999, several years before he became director of the Show Up Project, Stephen Smith published an article in which he included my argument that, quote, more and more talk about survivors or from survivors has not meant better talk with survivors. He suggested, quote, a form of visual history that is dialogical rather than testimonial in nature. Conducted after survivors had given a conventional testimony, dialogical interviews were grounded in survivors' reflections about their testimony. Smith wrote that, quote, it is the choice of episodes as much as the episode itself which may provide insight for further discussion. Of course, as we know, other dimensions in testimony mostly won the day. So one more example of learning together for this day. Leon retold the same episode, the execution of a fellow prisoner named Huberman, ironically, in each of our first three interviews in 1979. It was the only memory he repeated in this way, and it was clear each time that he did not recall having told me the episode before. Indeed, he introduced each iteration with a comment that this was a sort of traumatic memory, his word, that he rarely retells. So here's a guy who kept remembering what he says he hardly ever remembers without remembering that he kept remembering it. What, I wondered, was going on? By the third iteration, Leon and I had established a solid working relationship. I was therefore confident that he would be comfortable discussing the significance of this episode and his returns to it. And what followed remains one of the most memorable moments from all my interviews with survivors, precisely because of the learning together entailed. I had my own hypothesis about the repetitions, which I foolishly shared. Leon responded with some frustration. Yeah. See, this is a good example of how hard it is to convey. You pose a question, I owe you an explanation. There are a few elements you could not have known. And so Leon proceeded to explain what I could not have known, nor could anyone have known from the event as initially retold. The key was that Hubman's execution in full context meant that no one would survive. Leon explained. Despite the killing all around us, we imagined this camp, this little labor camp, was a little island of security, and the Hubman incident destroyed the whole thing. You see, this was the moment of truth. Hubman was a favorite, even to them, to the Germans, he was a favorite. All of a sudden, we see that no one's life is worth a damn. They would kill you with as much thought as it takes to step on a cockroach. And so our pipe dream was shattered right there. It was suddenly and dramatically shattered, along with Hubman's skull. Leon then described the shattering from the inside, still the most vivid description of trauma as experience, as I've heard in 50 years of listening to survivors. It was a feverish feeling, a terrible intensity. It is like the only reality here is death. I wasn't aware of anything around me. One moment the universe became what was real was only the turmoil within you. The rest was gone. The rest ceased to exist. Used with precision, trauma refers to overwhelming terror in the face of anticipated imminent annihilation, i.e., I'm toast. That is what Leon recalls. I have reviewed 5 interviews that Leon did for other projects between 1975 and 2006, all but one after our 1979 meetings. The other interviews were all in single testimony format. The Hubman execution is mentioned in each, but none include Leon discussing its significance or impact. Rather, it is one of a series of atrocities. Nothing more was asked, just as I would not have asked more had Leon not kept coming back to it over 3 interviews. Discussing the Hubman story with Leon also occasioned an insight about retelling more generally, and again a comment that would be rare in a conventional testimony. After I asked the half question, so this story, Leon insisted about all his Holocaust recounting. It is not a story. It has to be made a story in order to convey it, and with all the frustration that implies, because at best you compromise. Now, had I not used the word story, I could easily have said memory or episode. It is unlikely that Leon ever would have made this comment. My saying story was the immediate trigger. What happens in a collaborative interview largely depends on what has already happened, including what just happened. That is why they are interviews rather than vending machines, in which one person deposits a question and the other pops out an answer. Leon's reflection emerged between us, a direct result of conversational process. It is a virtual certainty that neither one of us could have anticipated it beforehand or arrived at it alone. The paradigm of evolving conversation is less familiar to us than the paradigm of fixed and finished testimony, and not only with Holocaust survivors. We favor single authors over co-authors, especially single authors with presumed expertise. That may be why Leon's comment, which has gratefully been cited by many, is typically attributed to me. Greenspan writes that it is not a story, etc. Of course, it was Leon, not Greenspan, who said it, but the operative author was both of us, learning together. It is wonderful that my conversations with Leon have widened to include others, students, colleagues, other survivors. Leon died a few years ago, but he is with us in voice, perspective, and intellectual presence, as to some degree, I hope he was also with us at least a bit today. When I see my students actively wrestle with the views of survivors whom I've known, debating and discussing excerpts from interviews that I did 40 years ago, I'm always moved. At least in those ways, conversations with survivors continue if we take serious time and pay serious attention. They require actual, not artificial, intelligence. They require actual, not artificial intelligence. Last bit about the future. Some of you know that in 1975, 3 members of my would-be doctoral dissertation committee told me first, Hank, all the work on survivors has already been done. Second, and this also verbatim, anyway, the survivors are all dying. That was 1975. A few months earlier, a very lively survivor told me I was the first American born in the US after the war with whom he'd ever spoken about the Holocaust, as I was to hear many times. So all the work on survivors must have been done without survivors themselves. The grad school experience was the beginning of my wondering, as I still wonder, how real survivors have ever been to us. That is, real as people like us learning together, rather than epiphenomena of the Holocaust, categories, artifacts, and similar. For me, sustained acquaintance and deepening conversation were the antidote to our phobias, fantasies, and categories, presumptive categories regarding survivors. I will not emulate my grad school professors and presume a future that is still unfolding, but I will suggest that whatever is most worthy that the future brings will not mainly be about the elegance or sophistication of textual or digital products. It will be, as it has always been, about the seriousness and depth of the conversations that they evoke, if not with survivors, then with our colleagues, our students, and ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Apologies.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all our presenters. And we now have at least, I think, 20 minutes or so to take questions and comments. And I will try to monitor them. But whoever wants to jump in is welcome.
I will jump in, if I may. I have a question for Laura. Thank you for your fascinating presentation, all 4 of you. Laura, I was wondering if you know when the Auschwitz map was made, the digital map, because I think that recently I was in this panel where the director of Auschwitz talked about their how they dealt with the COVID-19 crisis, and how and I thought that this may, I was wondering if it was as a result of the current crisis, or was it curated before? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. What is interesting is that actually it exists already since some years. I don't know exactly the year, but it's not a reaction to COVID. And this is very interesting, I think. Yeah.
I would just want to add that the Memory Loops project of Michaela Milian, I don't think she defines it as a map. So I was wondering if that's something that comes into play, because as far as I know, she defines it as a soundscape or memory site or something, or monument, I think.
Yes, it's defined as a monument. Yes, it's the official monument of the city of Munich, a virtual monument. But I think still it is interesting that it uses a map interconnected with sound, obviously, yes. But of course, it will be interesting how she sees it. That's what I hope to find out in an interview with her.
I see we have a couple of questions in the chat. So let me read them. Oh, it's Tobias, it's you. So you just go ahead.
I have some background noises. That was the reason why I chose the chat, but I try my very best. So I would like to ask to Shir and Lital how far this method which you introduced can be also used to analyze other digital media infrastructures than video games. And Laura, I'm quite interested about the relationship between maps or digital maps and storytelling. And I would like to ask you if you see a connection here, or if these maps are closer to databases as kind of with search options and gaining additional information and things like that. So where do you see the potential here?
So thank you, Tobias. How far? I guess that as far as it can get to. I think that the main focus of attention in the visual walkthrough is kind of trying to capture and analyze playful images, this kind of very, let's say, a bit ambiguous images that it's quite hard to tell when does one start and the other begin, what exactly is the historical reference in this kind of new digital adaptation, what is incorporated into one image that used to be a still and now has other kind of elements in it. So we believe that it's not so much about the media being video games as much about the images in digital infrastructures. And so now intuitively, we think that it could also be applied in augmented or virtual reality tours, perhaps more on virtual reality tours that kind of simulate images and also remediate images in various ways in digital spheres. So, yeah.
Should I answer now to Tobias? Okay. Yeah, I find this question very interesting. I've been thinking about it also already, and I think that, for example, the memory loops map or soundscape is an example where you can see that maps can be used in narration or in narrative ways. I think this is an example, and there are other maps that work more, as you said, like databases. But yes, I think that these categories, this narrativity, I think this will be very interesting for me to consider it. Thank you.
Okay, Eliana, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this panel together, and I think Hank's points at the end are so much about humanizing and the ethics of memory and of exploring it. And I wonder if any of the other panelists would sort of reflect on that in their own practices and the places that they're studying and how and where and if there's room for that kind of humanistic approach.
Can I answer? I just want to say that in my point of view, art challenge this ethics all the time. So it's a discursive space to talk about ethics, whether it's ethics of representations in the sense that are there conventions of how to represent these places or sites or events. And also in this sense, there's also the discourse, at least in art history, about provocation as a new kind of ethics or as a form of ethics, because it raises challenges that don't take internalization of memories for granted. So it's also can be seen also from the other, or being attacked from the other directions of this performativity and being experienced a gas chamber as a challenging conceptions of what is, or do we have ethics or Holocaust conventions on how to approach these places. I don't know if I really answered, maybe someone else can take it as well, but I just wanted to say that it's also a question if we have a guide where ethics starts, or a border where ethics starts and where it's not. So,
if I may add, I think that our configuration of the visual walkthrough method is a tool that kind of helps unpack the narrative that is stated in between and throughout, that is intertwined in playful images. And what we saw in Call of Duty is that some boundaries, aesthetical boundaries, which I think can also be termed as ethic, still remain, even though we play with images and we play within the spaces of Second World War. We only play as photographers of those images and we don't intervene in them. Yeah, so we don't participate in those kind of atrocious images that we know from the visual memory of the Holocaust, but we just watch them. And I think that there's a very fine line here that can also be regarded in terms of ethics. And yeah, that our tool can help us see that and clarify that.
Can I once for Hank
go
as
ahead,
well.
Go ahead.
Can I?
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead, Hank.
I
wanted.
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to ask if what role, I understand this the importance of this kind of not only empathic but also continued and generative listening. What role does the body and the emplacement of the interview play in the way these things play out? I'm thinking of a quote of Lanzmann when he said it, making his film, he said, I'm not interested in memories. What I need to do is to make these people into characters, in the sense of having them relive through the kind of mise en scène at the place in his case.
Right.
What role does the body and the surrounding play, and is there any way that and how do you imagine the serious conversation of those who are not survivors continuing, or the same sort of seriousness of conversation, the same conversation?
Right. So that's for me, Jackie. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's on one level, when we lose survivors, we lose survivors, and I believe there is no way. And I don't just mean that, sentimentally. There are things that are lost forever, and in my own interviews, for example, I didn't quote him in these 15 minutes, but there was a guy who was actually one of the future Blinka survivors who not only talked about the war, his experience, but who enacted them. He performed them, literally. I mean, he would not talk, but he would stand up, walk around the room, move behind a chair to tell me how he hid at particular moments. This is about, video testimony was also too small a frame for him, and he eschewed it. He chose not to do it, not for that reason only. He also found it very intrusive for him personally to be on a small screen like that. He had no interest in someone coming into his living room, which seemed to be the option. In fact, even coming into his home. So the very place where we were was also because of physical choice. He set the scene, literally. In this case, it was a Jewish community center that he told nobody that he was going to, and a sort of anonymous space. That's all gone. I mean, it's in my memory of that art meetings, and I can explain it. I can talk with you and others about it, but it cannot be recreated. And I think, what we're left with is indirect conversations. And I guess as people like me who have memories of those events also go, then, we get further away in that sense. That said, we have for years, and as you see, I took the role, because I am, of really the old school perspective. But, for years, in good seminars, in my biased view, There are ways of reading people who we've never known, at least I haven't, Primo Levi, Delbo, Jean-Marie, and helping to some extent to make them present. I don't mean in some magic way in the room, but present as a perspective. Very quickly, when we read in my seminar, those people, we literally read out loud. We literally read passages from Levi out loud. And to every extent possible, I work to allow him to be in the circle of the seminar. There's a seat for him. Of course, that's all fantasy, but present as a perspective, that's old school. That's it's Talmudic in a way, but it really is taking time, which matters, reading out loud every word, listening. Why did he say this? Do you think, why did he say that? What does he say? Going back to, in his case, the text again and again and again as, a moving document. No, it will never be the same as presence in all the physical and other ways that we think of that. It will never be, the dynamism of real dialogue with a real person. It just won't be. But we have each other, and we have whatever extent of presence we can create for whomever else in the circle. So it's an approximation from my personal point of view, and this is why I didn't discuss holograms directly at all, or even video testimonies. But to me, I'll just say that's a better approximation of what, or closer one, but I don't want to make better or worse categories, really. It's closer for me to genuine engagement with another perspective than what I call the sort of vending machine model. Put in a question, pop out an answer. That's not how conversation goes with anybody. Except maybe, certain kinds of survey research or, sports reporting. How was the game? Great. Blah, 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 blah. It's not conversation, including interview conversation. So short answer to a long answer is we do as well as we can, knowing we've lost it.
Thank you.
There is a question here by Paul. Paul, you still want to ask that question? Want me to read it?
I'll just very briefly pose a question to people engaged in the
Yes,
visual analysis. Thinking about the audio layer of these different kinds of artifacts, memorials, games. We didn't talk about the audio and the musical cues directly, but I was struck in the Call of Duty game how it's the sort of very, very standard music for a somber scene of a concentration camp, where the TikTok users who are doing different kinds of representations of this, they don't use that music at all, as far as we've found. They use completely different music. The question also goes to, when you're in a Holocaust museum or memorial, you have a directionality of sound, sometimes intentional, sometimes not. Sometimes you're hearing things from the gallery next door that it seems to me it would be hard to recreate in a digital space, but maybe I'm wrong about that. So this goes to Noga's presentation, the thinking for the visual history, the Holocaust project as well, what that would look like. Thanks for letting me pose a sort of orthogonal question to the panel.
I think I'm the last one who should take it, no? Okay.
So, thank you, Paul. The sonic images are quite interesting, but the thing about the visual walkthrough method is that, yeah, I mean, we considered doing it a multimodal method, but then it's just basically the walkthrough method. And the thing that we wanted to do with the visual walkthrough method in our work in the VHH, in the visual history of the Holocaust, while making this kind of metadata of images from video games, is to try to understand better the main thing about Call of Duty, which are the images and the way that we play with the images. But yeah, of course, if we think about the layer of sonic images, they kind of like encourage the user, or let's say motivate him towards a certain place. Like, let's say when Daniel says, take this photograph, the world's gotta know, yeah? And then talks about all of the suffering and the atrocities that went on those camps. then of course it's kind of like very encouraging and stresses the act of seeing and not participating within the image. So we do kind of see it, but as further contextual information in regards to visual analysis. So answering your questions, since the focal point is the visual analysis, we focus on the visual images. But yeah, of course, and I think it's also interesting in relation to also Laura's work on cartography and memorials, and I think that the sonorous images really add another layer. And if I may also ask Laura, you know, when I think about cartography, I also think about, or if it's maybe like one of the biggest things I think about is about the narratives that are conveyed in those maps and in the art of cartography. So if you have a few minutes to maybe share with us which narratives can you find in those maps, or any dominant kind of trends that you find in those maps in terms of ideas and narratives.
Yeah, maybe I say also a little bit about the sound, because I'm not sure if I understood your question, but as I heard it, you also asked about the difference of the role that sound plays in space, like museum, for example, the difference to the digital. And I think a potential of, for example, projects like memory loops is that you can hear it on your earphones on site. You can walk in the city and hear it with the earphones. And this, I think, has this, I don't know, yesterday, I think there was also the subject of intimacy of this digital, that this can create some other kind of intimacy. And I think that that is somehow maybe a potential of this digital sound role. And the other question about, the narration in cartography, I mean, I think it's a very big question. I really not sure if I can answer this, because there are so many different, I don't know, threads of narration possible with cartography, I think. I mean, in the examples I showed you, there is the first one in the Mauthausen Memorial, where the audio guide is also embedded in the map. So the narration, this can be seen as a narration, of course, I think, because you have also you have the order where you have to start. So you listen this first, but then there is also your own narration that you can somehow create by choosing, right? You can, the listener can choose what he or she listens first, or what he or she looks at, or which historical image, which point they choose, etc. So yeah, I think it's a very, very complex question about the narration, but I'm very glad actually about these comments, because it shows me that it's something to look at in more detail. Yeah, thank you.
Any really final comments or questions before we close this panel? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. It's been a fascinating panel, and I hope to see you still here in the next one. And it will be at 6 o'clock, right? Okay, good. Thank you very much. See you soon.
See you soon. We will keep the session open, the Zoom meeting open. So if you want to individually engage with each other,